post-secondary education in Canada, but first I wanted to introduce Larry Booi. He's been a strong advocate for students and has worked with Public Interest Alberta, who is one of students' strongest allies in this province, and we really appreciate their work. They held a post-secondary conference last year that brought attention to a lot of the deficiencies in the review that happened with the province. So without further ado, here's Larry Booi.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you all for coming out. Let me say, first of all, that you people are really fortunate in the kind of advocacy representation that you've been getting from your Students' Union. Those of us who work in an advocacy community in this province see the kinds of things behind the scenes that maybe you don't. And people like Sam Power and Dave Cornway have been an integral part of PIA's post-secondary, the task force, the democracy task force. They are giving you exemplary advocacy, and I really think you ought to know that. The second thing is that I think you have far more allies in this than you're aware of. I think there's a growing understanding that in Alberta this government has been on the wrong road on post-secondary education. Basically, they've tried to privatize, individualize, commercialize, and commodify the whole thing, to turn it over to individuals and families. When in fact, what they've needed to see is that this is a matter of the public interest and the public good, and that everybody benefits from this province's investment in you people every day. And that's starting to be understood. You know, it's one thing for the people to be involved in post-secondary education, to advocate for it, the students, the staff, but what you're getting lately is a whole lot of people who are not in post-secondary education on your side. And in Public Interest Alberta, we have 33,000 teachers, 24,000 nurses, a great host of healthcare workers. All of them are on your side because they get it. It's in the public good and the public interest. My advice to you is this. In this province, you don't get what you need and you don't get what you deserve. You get what you fight for, and ultimately you get what you settle for. And I'll tell you, you've got an excellent case. When you have a premier who told you that we're going to have the lowest tuition fees in the country, you hold this government's feet to the fire. What you have to do, I think, is fight for the kinds of post-secondary situations that you know will benefit you and the rest of the country. Fight for those things and don't settle for less. Good for you.
The Stephen Colbert on notice board. And put some of those groups that maybe haven't been too friendly to post-secondary education. Now you see here we already have Bill 40, and that was the bill over the summer that took tuition out of legislation and into regulation. And this means that the provincial government can change the policy on tuition at a moment's notice within days. We have no security in terms of what our tuition increases will be over the next few years. So we need the government to put that policy back in legislation, and that's why Bill 40 is on notice. Now, we've got the 1990s budget cuts. Now, I think that's fairly obvious. The cuts that happened in the 1990s have been devastating to post-secondary education. Our buildings aren't funded, our students are in debt, and they're working 20 hours a week to get through their education. So we put the 90s budget cuts at both the provincial and federal levels on notice. Now, Rod Fraser, for those of you who are new to campus, that was our president a few years ago, the president of the University of Alberta, and Larry pointed out the wrong road, and I think maybe Rod took us a little bit further down that wrong road when he decided to invest in private corporations, private donations, looking for research institutions, and taking money away from the undergraduate experience here on campus. And finally, we've got the man himself, Ralph Klein, for failing to prioritize post-secondary education for the 15 years that he was in office. Now we wanted to put a few more people on notice. Dave's just bringing them up here. The provincial and the federal student loan program have not changed for, well, I can't even remember, but they're putting students in debt, and we have an average of about $20,000 worth of debt per student in this province, and we think a lot more can be done to get students out of debt. So, to get students out of debt, we're putting the student loan program on notice. Here's a favorite of mine, the Board of Governors. Now, individually they're not bad people, but for some reason when they get together, they seem to make bad decisions. The Board of Governors had a choice in the mid-90s. Sure, their funds were cut by the provincial and federal governments, but they didn't have to turn on their students. They could have said no. They could have said, we're standing up for our students. We're going to turn to the province and ask them to put that money in. We don't have to put the burden on students. And yet, they turn to us, and they continue to turn to us, even when our province has a huge amount of money to be putting back into universities and students. So, Board of Governors, you're on notice. Now for this last one, if we could get Janelle Morin up to the stage. Now, Janelle is with the Lister Hall Students Association. And she was instrumental in putting together the petition against the 10% residence rent increase that happened in January. And how many signatures did you get, Janelle?
1,700 across the residences.
And we took that petition to the aforementioned Board of Governors, and for some reason they didn't really take notice. But Janelle here put in a lot of work, and a lot of Lister students put in a lot of work to advocate against the 10% residence rent increase. Now, we have a chance, again, to go to the provincial government to get them to invest and help rural students get to post-secondary education by lowering their rent costs and helping them to get the education that they need to get the jobs that they need. So we're going to the provincial government in the next few months to ask for that residence rent to be decreased and for the funding for a proper residence system to be put in place for the quality